Sick of getting blisters? Stop slipping and just be comfortable with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Great fit, great comfort, lots of grip, and an even better price. Available now at puregripsocks.com.
Over the last 10 years, Under Armour has had a really hard time breaking into the football boot market. And it's not because they haven't had some great football boots, because they have, but for other reasons, be it pricing, be it looks, be it availability, they've just never really caught on. And over the last couple years, it seemed like they pretty much gave up on football boots entirely until 2023, where they appear to be making a push again, this being their latest model. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the brand new Under Armour clone Magnetico Elite 3.0 football boots. Not exactly the most catchy name for a boot that is visually an acquired taste, to say the least, and something that I've always applauded Under Armour for when they have put out football boots is that they really don't copy anybody. They're very unique as far as their design philosophy is concerned, and these are no different. The question now becomes, have they gone too far? Because there are certain elements of the design of this football boot that I think are really good, but some that maybe have gone a little bit too far, with the boot itself having a retail price of $250, basically putting it at the same price point as all of the most popular models from Nike, Adidas, and Puma. Which right off the bat puts these in a tough spot, because I don't think there are that many people that are going to be willing to pay $250 for the unknown of a top-end Under Armour football boot versus the usual suspects from Nike and Adidas. With that said, some aggressive design elements definitely make these very unique compared to just about anything else out there. So the question now becomes, are they any good, and are they worth the $250 price tag? We're gonna go over all the details of these boots in today's video, including how they fit and feel on feet. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around. And if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you can pick them up below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the first link down below. And as always, if you enjoy these brutally honest reviews on brands that you don't necessarily see every day, don't forget to drop a like on this video and make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't already, so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2023. So first things first, it has nothing to do with performance, but it definitely matters when you're going to ask $250 for a pair of football boots, and that is the way that these look. I think that's one of the elements of Under Armour football boots that has never gone over all that well. Some obviously better looking than others, but this boot in particular, obviously they've kept the Under Armour logo to a minimum, just placing it there on the heel, but the bulging kind of padding on the side of the ankle ultimately just doesn't look that visually appealing. And in this red, green, and purple Joker-esque looking colorway, I just don't know that it's a pair of football boots that many people are going to look at and say, yeah, those are good looking. With that in mind, this is definitely the boldest of the three colorways that are currently available, where you can get them in a whiteout as well as a blackout, where I would definitely argue the boots do look a lot better. But let me know your opinion on the look of these boots down below in the comments. As for the performance side of things, the upper is by far the most unique aspect of this new football boot, but ultimately not an element that I would say is overly new from Under Armour. The last boots that I reviewed on this channel featured a very similar clone synthetic material, where it's a very stretchy material that has this thick foam padding on the inside that's extremely spongy, so it ultimately doesn't end up feeling thick on the ball, but does give you that nice padded feel with a stretchy liner on the inside, and then kind of like this artificial leather grain finish on the surface, with the stretch itself being managed by what is basically a ton of stitching across the entire upper, which is partially why you see this super low profile toe box and forefoot area. The idea behind this material being that when you slide your foot inside the boot, it kind of stretches around your foot and instantaneously matches its shape. Does that actually work? Yes and no. And the reason why I say that is because I think on this model in particular, especially in comparison to past boots that I've tried, they've taken that low profile design and the stretch of the upper to an extreme that I just don't think is going to work for most people. This is way too low, and it actually is so low profile that my toes cannot make it to the end, to the point where I actually think you have to size up, not because the boot length itself is too short, but because the upper itself is too tight right at the tip of the toe. At least for me, your mileage may vary depending on the shape of your feet. with that in mind, I do think the touch of this upper is really, really nice. It's super pliable, it's super flexible, and despite its very stretchy nature, it does actually feel very secure on your feet. Compared to the last model, which had a one-piece upper construction, this kind of pushes the laces slightly to the lateral side and gives you a traditional U-throat construction, which I really, really like. The tongue itself being made from this synthetic leather with this hard memory foam padding at the top that actually matches the thickness of the rest of the upper really, really nicely. And you can see all of these lines and dots on the surface in green as well as purple. They're actually a 3D printed grip texturing that I would say works really well to an extent. And the reason why I say that is when you drag your foot along the ball for a dribble or something like that, the grip is super noticeable. Whereas when you shoot the ball, there's just a lot less cling to the upper. It doesn't feel quite as sticky. So it's a very interesting grip in that depending on the type of contact that you make, the grip may be more noticeable versus the upper being left a little bit more slippery, because without this texturing, like the previous model had, the upper itself really doesn't have much in the way of extra grip. But overall, I really like the feel of this. It's kind of along the lines of what we have right now from the Nike Tiempo Legend 10 Elite, in that synthetic leather upper that does feel very leather-like, but also has some synthetic characteristics. I wouldn't say this is quite as leather-like, but if they were to modify the shape of this particular football boot, I think this upper feels just about as good as anything. Really impressed with it. Which brings us to the rear, where you can see they've gone for a very sculpted looking low-cut construction with all this extra padding that really does nothing in terms of performance benefit. There's arguably some added protection from this padding on the outside, which is just a really stiff foam. And internally, you have a really firm heel counter that basically runs all the way to the top. Inside, however, they've done something very Under Armour-y, where we've seen this on past models from them, where it's very, very sculpted and the padding has been kept to a minimum. Instead, there's this mesh liner material that basically sits directly against the internal plastic heel counter with some sculpted, very firm foam basically at the top portion of the liner to kind of pinch your heel and hold it in place, which it does very, very effectively. The lockdown in the heel is fantastic. However, because it pinches your heel towards the top area of the ankle, it's very uncomfortable, at least for me. It's one of those elements that is pretty much guaranteed to give me blisters. I did not enjoy testing out these football boots for that specific reason, but for somebody that likes that super tight fitting heel, this might be really good for you. This is something that I've really experienced with Under Armour football boots, and honestly even a lot of Under Armour runners and trainers, where I really like what they've done with the overall shoe, but this sculpted heel design just typically does not work for me, and it is unfortunately exactly the same situation for this pair of football boots. It looks cool, but it feels very uncomfortable, and it's part of the reason why I just personally would never want to wear these. And then the insole, fully removable, I really do like it. It's made from a mesh liner on the surface, and then it's multi-layers of foam. So you can see there's a base layer of yellow foam, then you have a blue foam, then you have some green foam, some red foam. There is some design that actually went into this. It's probably the most expensive insole to produce in the world of football boots, and as we've seen again from Under Armour in the past, they do some of the best football boot insoles. Which brings us to the base of the football boot, where you're going to find a solid plastic sole plate that is very much on the flexible side of things. If you're looking for something that has that natural feel, this definitely gives it to you. And when you pair that up with this very pliable clone synthetic upper with the nice softness that it has, I think the two elements work well together. And then the stud pattern itself, they've really not done anything too adventurous. You're gonna find what are basically conical studs in the forefoot, at least the first four, but then the back four have this little extension blade element to it, which I wouldn't say is particularly noticeable. This still very much feels like a more traditional, almost Tiempo-esque stud pattern in terms of having that twist and pivot feel, where again, you can see under the heel, you have again, a conical stud with a little blade that kind of hangs off of each side, which is a very cool shape for a stud, but ultimately again, they just feel very normal. I don't have any issues with this sole plate and stud pattern. I think it feels great. I think the traction is excellent, but from a weight perspective, as you'll see in just a moment, I do think they definitely would have benefited from going with a type of plastic that's perhaps a little bit thinner, or at the very least, a little bit lighter. When it comes to weight, not that every football boot has to be as light as possible, but for $250, I think the expectation is that they'll be lighter than most. And in a size 9.5 US, you can see that these Under Armour boots weigh in at 9.45 ounces, the equivalent of 268 grams, which for a top-end model basically positions it as currently the heaviest ones you can buy. And that's not to say that these are so heavy that they're unwearable. That's definitely not the case, but pound for pound, quite literally, they do weigh significantly more than the more popular top-end boots out there on the market that cost the same amount of money, some a little bit more and some significantly less. The closest weight comparison would be the Predator Accuracy 0.1 Mid with the lacing system. These weighed in right around 9 ounces, these being about half an ounce more, which is still a noticeable difference in weight. On feet, and I don't often get to say this, these football boots feel about as weird as they look. I think the clone upper with its stretch is incredibly soft and pliable, feels great on the ball, really good against your foot. However, the shaping of that super low profile toe box area where the expectation is for the upper to stretch, they just made it so low profile that it doesn't stretch enough to the point where it feels like it is pushing down on your toes uncomfortably tight. And also, I have a top-down view here. Take a look at the right boot versus the left boot, particularly in the toe box area. You can see how much more squared off the right toe is versus the left, where it's just wider. It's a different shape altogether, both the plastic as well as the upper. I'm not sure what happened there. I'm sure it's some kind of a manufacturing defect, but for $250, that is totally unacceptable. The two boots should be as close to the same shape as possible, and unfortunately that's not the case. But ultimately, the biggest problem that I have with these football boots from a fit and comfort perspective is the heel. All the pressure is in the high portion at the side and the back of the heels at the point where it's just uncomfortable. And again, depending on the shape of your heel, you might not have the same issue, but I think for the vast majority of people, this is just a construction through the heel that you're not going to find very comfortable compared to other models out there. Certainly for this amount of money, they feel like a pair of football boots where the design was prioritized over the fit and the comfort, which isn't always a bad thing necessarily, but I do think they made a couple mistakes in regards to the shaping and comfort that definitely just could have been a lot better. From a width perspective, they have some decent width through the midfoot and forefoot area. Again, that toe box and the heel, they just have a very tight fit that I think most people won't be a big fan of. So as long as you don't have excessively wide feet, they'll technically work for most people. But in general, the fit, I would say, is on the unique side that, again, you probably don't want. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US. And because of that super low profile toe box, it makes the boots fit shorter than they actually are. My toes would be perfect for the length of this sole plate, but because of how low profile that upper is and not having enough stretch to it, my toes aren't able to make it to the end. So if anything, they feel like they run about a quarter size long, but if I go up half a size, now the boots feel a little bit too big. So it's kind of one of those tricky things where I'm personally in between sizes for the shape and concept that they've gone for here. But I do think for most people, true to size is probably the way to go. But if you're really worried about the toes being too tight, going up half a size would probably be in your best interest. So in conclusion, as much as there are certain things about these that I really like, they are not Under Armour's best effort when it comes to making a pair of football boots. I think the clone synthetic upper feels awesome and I really like what they did with the stud pattern. However, the comfort is a letdown. The inconsistent shaping between the left and right football boot is something that really needs to be addressed, because for $250, that's just totally unacceptable. And the overall weight of the boot being as heavy as it is just totally unnecessary given the design that they've gone for and given what we've seen Under Armour do with their football boots in the past. Are these worth $250? Absolutely not.